Hi everyone, it's Laura here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video I'm gonna show you how to create a celebration card using products by Heffy Doodle stamps and a die by My Favorite Things. For this card I used the Heffy Doodle Stamps Hedlas Quick Heart stamp set, which I really love because it's full of adorable images and funny sentiments. So to start off this card, I stamped the 4 mice images in this set on some Nina Solar White cardstock using Memento Tuxedo black ink because I wanted to color them with my Copic markers. I am using some warm gray markers to coloring these images, and I am using my W3 and W1 because I want them to stay pretty light. I am adding some very quick shading and placing the shadows as if the light source is on the top left corner. And because these images are so small, it didn't take long at all to color them in. I am only using 2 markers to add shading and dimension, and I started by laying down my W3 marker in the areas where I thought there would be a shadow, so the W3 is the darker marker that I'll be using today. I then came in with my W1 marker and blended out the W3 towards the highlight areas. And then, because I felt I was losing a little bit too much contrast, I came back in with the W3 and deepened the shadows. To keep the video a little bit shorter, and because the coloring of the images is pretty simple, I decided to show you the coloring just for a couple of these mice and to skip the rest. And initially I thought I would only use the mice for my card, but then I decided to also stamp and color these cheese slices, and for that I used my Spectrum Noir markers. I used markers in the GY family, and I am noticing now as I'm doing the voiceover that I'm adding the shadows as if the light is on the top right corner, so in the opposite position as I did for my mice. But I think this really doesn't matter too much. These cheese slices ended up being in the inside of the card anyway, and maybe if I hadn't mentioned it, not too many people would have noticed, who knows. Coming back to the card, I am adding the shadows on the left and the lower areas of the cheese slice, and I am using GY1, GY2, GY3 and GY4 for the slice itself, and GY1, GY3, GY4 and GY5 for the holes in the cheese, because those areas are receded and they will be darker compared to the rest of the cheese slice. I also wanted to bring to your attention the fact that I am adding the shadows in the holes in a way that is opposite to the one that I use for the cheese slice, in the sense that here the shadows are in the right areas of the image. And the reason for that is that I am assuming that there is a shadow which is cast by the edge of the cheese inside the hole, and that shadow would be stronger in the areas closer to the light source, because there is where most of the light would get blocked. I hope that this explanation was somehow clear, but in general, if you are not sure about where to place your shadows, you can always look at pictures online, and this will definitely help. Once I was done coloring my images, I fussy cut them with my EK Success Cutter B scissors. These are really great scissors for detailed fussy cutting. The set does come with coordinating dies, but I don't have them, so I went with hand cutting them, which anyway didn't take very long at all. For my card base, I used the Heffy Doodle Stamps Clover Frames dies to cut 2 panels out of some yellow cardstock and some ochre cardstock that here in the camera looks much more orangey than it is in real life. I also used the Celebrate Dynamics, this is by My Favorite Things, to cut some black cardstock, but we will see later on that I will use a different color for my final card. And now I am doing some ink blending to the edges of my panels. For the smaller one, I am using Distress Oxide in Wild Honey, and I am using a rather light hand and applying the ink only to the edges, because I want to add some interest and depth to these panels. For the larger one, which measures 4¼ by 5½ inches, I am first doing some ink blending with my Memento ink in Toffee Crunch. I am using a Ranger mini ink blender to apply the ink, and again I am staying only close to the edges and I am applying it to all 4 sides. And then I am adding some Distress Oxide in Wild Honey to add some warmth and bring everything together. With that same Wild Honey Distress Oxide, I did some repeated stamping of this mini cheese slice, which is also part of the Heffy Doodle Hello Quick Heart stamp set, to add some subtle detail to this panel. And the fun thing about the oxides is that they work really great for stamping, so you can easily coordinate stamped and blended elements on your cards, and they will always match perfectly. I cut my sentiment twice using the My Favorite Things Celebrate Dynamics die, and I cut it once out of some light brown cardstock and once from the same ochre cardstock that I used for my A2 sized panel. And on this last one I created an ombre effect by blending again Memento ink in Toffee Crunch and Distress Oxide in Wild Honey to the lower part of the sentiment. And this will tie it nicely with the rest of the card. I then went ahead and started adhering everything. I am using Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to adhere the front panel to the card base. And I love using liquid glue because it gives you time to position things exactly where you want them. I am also using that same Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to stack my 2 sentiments together. And I will adhere them slightly shifted with respect to each other because I want to create a drop shadow effect. And also in this case, the fact that I'm using liquid adhesive allows me to move things around so that I get an even shadow for my sentiment. I then decided to add another line to the sentiment, and I picked the one from the Hello Quick Heart stamp set that reads "Have a really great day," which is absolutely adorable. I stamped it with Versamark ink on a strip of that same brown cardstock that I used for my die cut sentiment, and then I heat embossed it with white embossing powder by Ranger. I then went ahead and started adhering everything. I started from this strip which I adhered on the bottom portion of my card, and then I moved on to the die cut sentiment which I adhered right above that sentiment strip. And finally I added 3 of the 4 mice that I had colored before all around the sentiment, and I especially love the one that looks like he's sliding on the letter T. I think it's a very fun detail. I used some double-sided adhesive to mount my card front on a top folding A2 card base, and because I'm not usually very precise at this, I used the surface of my desk as a guide, and this way I pretty much always get the positioning right. As a very final finishing touch, I used the 4th mouse and the cheese slice to decorate the inside of my card. You could also add another sentiment here, but I wanted to have enough space to write my own message, so this time I didn't. And that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments below, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. You can visit my blog for the full list of supplies, and I'll catch you guys soon with the next one. Ciao!